and BASF. We're grateful for both of their continued support for Ag Literacy. We're glad that you can be a part of this as well. We encourage you to stay for each session, but remember the sessions are being recorded and will be available on the National Agriculture in the Classroom site probably sometime early next week. This is the secondary track, and you can use the other link provided to flip back and forth between the sessions. During the session, listeners will be able to use the Q&A feature. And as your host, I'll work to relay these questions back to our presenters in Illinois. Please follow up with the National Agriculture in the Classroom program leader this week as we ask for your evaluation on the program. Without further ado, I'm going to introduce our two speakers that we have here. The first session that you have here is Things You Can Learn from an Ag Teacher and an English Teacher, presented by Illinois Ag in the Classroom. We have Chris Wyatt and Lee Deal. I'm going to turn it over to you. I will pop up with about 40 minutes left and we'll go from there. So with Chris and Lee, it's all yours.
Very good. Well, thank you so much. We're really happy to be here. And yeah, we're all going to go on a little ag literacy adventure here this morning. And so we're excited to show you some resources and some tactics that you can use to increase your ag literacy efforts. So before we start, we want to introduce each other so you can learn a little bit about us as well. So next to me here is Lee Deal. She is an education specialist for Illinois Ag in the Classroom. She's been with us about 2 years. Prior to that, Lee was a high school ag teacher for about 4 years. Lee has a sharp wit, a meticulously detailed daily planner, and she recently started keeping a sourdough starter. She's married to a corn and soybean farmer. They have 2 boys, 2 young boys together who are very good at collecting and often breaking eggs from their backyard flock of chickens. Lee is also a super fan of both Taylor Swift and Subway sandwiches. And her constant companion through life is her blush pink Stanley Cup, which is just off camera. There it is. And I've actually only seen Lee without this once, and that was the day that she brought her burnt orange Stanley Cup with her. And so otherwise, it's always with her. And so we asked you as you logged in here, and we're still asking you as well, if you haven't yet, in the Q&A, if you want to tell us a memorable favorite food from your childhood. So Lee and I talked about this ahead of time, and the first thing that came to her mind was every family get together. Her mom had 2 things that she would make that everyone just raved about. And so one was her perfectly fluffy mashed potatoes. People couldn't get enough of that, and they would all stand around the kitchen island talking about how great her mashed potatoes were. And as they're doing that, they were eating her deviled eggs, which were equally perfect and tasty. And that's very much something that Lee thinks about from her childhood.
Thank you, Chris. This is Chris Wyatt. He is the education manager, excuse me, for Illinois Ag in the Classroom. He's been in this job about 4.5 years, and prior to that, he taught high school English for 15 years. So he's the English teacher of this equation, and I'm the ag teacher. Chris is the creative think tank of our team. He's an expert on all things microgreens and pollinators, and he can always be counted on to bring the after lunch mints, which are around here somewhere. He even brought a stash with us today. The dad jokes and the party games. He's always got a party game in his back pocket. He and his wife run a cut flower farm outside of Bloomington, and at home, he's also an avid gardener and beekeeper alongside his 10-year-old son. He loves to spend the first 15 minutes of his day in a new book, with his nose in a new book, and he'll always encourage you to do the same. And just so you all know, when we presented this at National, he was nearly on his deathbed ill. And so you're getting him much better today than you would have gotten him at National.
I feel great now. Yeah.
Chris's childhood tasted like his mom's famous rainbow rotini with a Velveeta cheese sauce and cuts of broccoli and cauliflower mixed in. So he said that he just loved this meal growing up. And I asked him if his mom has ever made that for him as an adult, and he couldn't even recall. And he said that if she did, it probably wouldn't even taste the same as whenever he was a kid. So that is what Chris's childhood tasted like. And thank you all for your contributions in the Q&A. I will kind of read a couple of these, but I won't out you. I'll read them kind of anonymously. We've got blackberry bushes, so picking the blackberries, eating them straight from the bush. Cherry tomatoes, deer, chipmunks, and other critters also would like the cherry tomatoes on this person's property. This person says their mom made something called chicken, rice, and mushroom gravy, which sounds delicious, balanced and inexpensive, and sometimes added vegetables. So thank you all for your contributions there in the Q&A. We may ask you to throw a couple of other things in there as we kind of go on this ag literacy adventure. And we encourage you to share with us so that we can kind of all give each other some examples of what this might look like. So you have the
Yep,
mouse.
I got a mouse, yeah.
Look at that.
All right, so a little bit about Illinois Ag in the Classroom. We have a great website, so if you're looking for resources, we encourage you to go there. It's just agintheclassroom.org. And so a lot of what Lee and I do in our positions is we get to create lessons. We create our series of ag mags and other text resources. And we do a lot of presenting and teacher training. Illinois is also different than a lot of states where we actually have about 90 county level ag literacy coordinators. And so we partner with them. We create resources that they can then give to teachers at no cost. And so with their help, we reach about 600,000 students in Illinois every single year. And so we're pretty proud of that, and pretty blessed to have the ag literacy efforts here in Illinois that we do have.
So our goal for today, for this ag literacy adventure, is we're really going to provide you with some tangible strategies that you could take into your classroom to help students understand the things that you're providing them with, whether it be text or images, videos, those kinds of things. The goal here, I provided a little statistic here on the slide about reading comprehension. So 9-year-olds had the largest decline in reading since 1990 on the National Center for Education Statistics recent study. And then also in like a real world practical kind of application in this age that we're living in of information overload, especially when you throw AI into the equation. Wouldn't it be nice if we were teaching a generation of students who were able to digest this content, consume this content in a way that allowed them to think critically about it and really understand it, form opinions about it, and be able to ascertain what they need to know and what maybe isn't true or is not for them or those things. So we're going to help you kind of with some strategies to be able to share information in your classroom and have students be able to understand it in a more significant way. And kind of the ag teacher versus English teacher aspect of this, ag teachers have real world and creative nonfiction. And then also some traditional nonfiction text. So if you give them a current events article or an ag mag or something like that, what are some things that they can do to help them understand what they're reading? And then also images and videos. And we've kind of color coded these 4 categories of content or things that you might give them. And a lot of these strategies can be used for multiple of them. And you'll see how we kind of code that throughout the presentation.
And I think too, we're in the upper level track. When we designed this for the national conference, we were thinking more K through 12. And so both Lee and I have upper level backgrounds, but a lot of the work that we do at Ag in the Classroom now deals with those younger students. And so even if some of the examples are with a picture book, we're still going to connect it to ways that you can do it with an upper level class and bridge that gap and kind of use that for a variety of age groups as well. Yeah. So the first activity that we asked you to think about was this: what my childhood tasted like. Because we think that food is an excellent way to get kids thinking about agriculture, and they might not connect the food they eat with agriculture. And so we can help to try to bridge that gap. So these are a couple great picture books that we really like to be able to do this. And I did similar things in my classroom where if you can get kids thinking about it, they can start making lists of these foods that matter to them, get them to talk about them. And then we can see where the writing goes from there. So this is absolutely something that could work in an ELA classroom as well as an ag classroom and connect those different worlds there. If you were listening to the interview with Jacqueline Briggs Martin earlier this morning, so many of her books deal with food, but she's finding ways to connect that to agriculture and help kids see where that food comes from as well. And so getting kids to think about that and find similarities and differences with the foods they eat at home versus what some of their other classmates eat, we think that's a really good activity and could be taken in a whole lot of different directions there as well. Another activity we have here is called Ode to a Vegetable. And so we actually got this idea from this book, Ode to an Onion, Pablo Neruda and his Muse. And so this is a really, really great picture book. And so if you're not familiar with him, Pablo Neruda was an actual poet from Chile, one of the world's most famous poets. And at some point in his career, he decided he wanted to write a series of odes. And so odes come from ancient Greece. They were typically performed orally out in public, and usually they were about a person. So talking about how much you love someone or admire them, that kind of thing. And so what Pablo Neruda did was he decided, I'm going to write odes to common everyday items. And many of the things that he wrote odes to are agricultural products. So one of the poems he wrote was called Ode to an Onion, kind of one of the most unassuming vegetables out there. And so this book is a fictional version of how he got the idea for that. And it's a cool book because at the beginning and end, it's got actual onion skin paper in it. And then it also has the actual poem that he wrote, both in Spanish and in English. So again, another good example of this is a children's picture book, but we could absolutely use it for various grade levels as well. And so this lesson, Ode to a Vegetable, that we have on our website, and we'll show you how to get to all those here before we're done here today. Basically, it gets kids to think about a bunch of different poetic forms that they're already working with at various stages throughout school, and to apply that to vegetables or fruits or to things that they're eating. So we have things with acrostic poems where the first letter of each line ends up spelling, say, carrot, and that's what the poem is about. Or a concrete or a shape poem where the text is actually arranged in a way that mimics the shape of whatever it's about. And so I wrote an example that if you squint, it looks like an ear of corn, and the poem's about corn. So we're going to challenge you here again as we go through. So one of the most common and easy poetic forms is a haiku. So if you're not familiar with a haiku, it's 3 lines, and it is exactly 5 syllables, 7 syllables, 5 syllables. So one of the things that, we continue to have these different trends in education. And one of the trends that we see in writing, in particular in an English classroom, is that we want kids to be able to express themselves and not try to fit them into a box. When I was growing up, it was big on the 5-paragraph essay. And so a whole generation of kids learned that to write an essay, it had to be exactly 5 paragraphs long, which is not really a good thing to teach them. That being said, I think sometimes when you do put parameters on kids and you say you have to do something creative within these parameters, it really forces them to think really deeply about the words that they use and gets them to think more critically about how they're communicating. So I had a professor in college, and his definition for poetry was the most meaning in the fewest amount of words, which always stuck with me. I think that's a kind of a beautiful way to think about it. And so I wrote a haiku for you all here. And so you can see here, it says, first fruit of the year, laying on a bed of straw, seeds on the outside. And so you'll notice I intentionally didn't say what it was, but I'm sure Lee can figure out my haiku is about
Strawberries.
strawberries, right? And so that's kind of a cool way to do it, where you don't actually come out and say it, you just describe it, and then other kids have to guess what it is that you're talking about. So we're going to challenge you all in the chat, if you would, and we're going to keep moving on here, but if you want to think about a haiku, again, it's exactly 5 syllables, 7 syllables, 5 syllables. But if you want to try to write a little haiku and put that in the chat, that'd be great. And I don't know that you can hit enter down. And so if you want to do like a dash or a slash mark in between each line, that will show us where each line break is. So that's your first challenge here. Second challenge, I guess, if you count the what your childhood tasted like one. But yeah, see if you can write a haiku about your favorite or least favorite fruit or vegetable. And let's see what we all can come up with here.
Okay, while you're thinking about that, we will kind of move on and talk about some different strategies. This one is called collaborative annotation, and this is one of our personal favorites from the entire list. And when we presented this at National, this was like such a hit. Everybody was really participative and had a lot of good things to say about this one. So the idea for collaborative annotation is that you're encouraging students to have a silent discussion about something, whether it be a poem or an article. It could even be an image if you wanted it to be. And so you would print a large copy, or it could be a regular size copy, and then make sure that you paste it onto something large, like a big poster that has lots of white space around it. And then have students in small groups get around it and silently read it and have a discussion, kind of. So they would kind of draw dashes and write their thoughts. This makes me think of this memory from childhood, or I'm not sure what this means, or something. And so they're kind of thinking and writing. And then as they're going, they're also in addition to responding to the actual text you've given them, they're also responding to each other. And so they're kind of going back and forth and writing. This is really fun if you give each student a different colored pen, and then they can kind of track and see which students wrote which things. And so it's all silent. That's the best part about it, because I think that if you are putting students in small groups and doing the same kind of thing, then but having them do it verbally, you're going to have that one or maybe two students that is very outspoken about it, and kind of takes charge of the conversation. And you may have some that are shy and not really willing to provide their input. But if it's all silent and everybody's got the same weapon, that pen, then they are all providing input in an equal way. And so this one was really fun. We did it at National. These were the instructions that we put up on the board for them, but then these were the examples of a few of the posters that they were collaboratively annotating. And so you can see that we've got smiley faces and hearts and yes, and all of these different ideas and conversations that were happening. And the content, what we gave them to do this with was poems from this book, When Green Becomes Tomatoes. And it's poems about garden crops and tomatoes, flowers, those kinds of things. And so we just took a scan or a copy of one of the poems, and then we pasted it on this big poster, and then put students in, or the participants put them in groups and had them have a silent discussion about it. And it was a hit. I mean, they loved this activity, and they all pretty much said that they were going to go back and do something like that in their classrooms. And so we were really excited about this one, something that seems so simple, but you may have never thought to do in a classroom in this way. So.
And it's weird at first. Like
yes,
it doesn't,
definitely.
It feels like you should just be able to talk, but if you truly force yourself or force your students to truly engage with it, it's pretty cool what they come up with. Yeah.
And I will say that even the teachers that were in the room, we were doing this in person in Salt Lake City, a couple of the groups couldn't stop talking. Like at first, they were still whispering to each other and trying to figure out what they were supposed to do. So so anyway, collaborative annotation, very, very fun one. The next one that we have, and we do have some haikus that are kind of rolling in here, but I'll talk about 1 Minute Write, and then we can maybe see if we want to share some of those from the Q&A. But 1 Minute Write is sort of like informally what might be called a brain dump. If you've ever heard that term or used that term, you give them something, an article, a book, a picture, something, and you'll see on the side here that this can work with all 4 of those categories of types of content. But you have them read it or look at it or watch it or whatever, and then write down all of their thoughts for 1 full minute. Put up a timer on the board, one of those fun ones that's like a duck race or a Santa Claus race or something on that countdown timer website, and have them just write everything that comes to mind. There's no wrong thoughts, no wrong answers. And this can kind of help them to provide kind of a gut reaction. And then if they were asked to summarize, what they thought about this, then they might have some things, some ideas to pull from. So another simple one, just a 1 minute, write down everything that comes to mind. And you might be surprised that your students will realize that they had more thoughts about whatever it was that you gave them than they really realized. They might think, I'm not going to be able to write about this for 1 minute, and they might be able to. So we do have some haikus. Can I read some?
Please,
can I read some haikus? Okay. All right. So this one says, small green round layered. Small green round layered. Yep. Tastes great with salt and pepper. However, children hate. Small green round.
The layered is I'm not sure of the layered. I was thinking tomatoes, but
no.
The layered doesn't. Yeah. What do you think it is?
It's Brussels sprouts.
Oh,
yeah.
All right.
Nice.
Okay.
Rip it, boil. Butter, sprinkle, eat. Row 1, ding, row 2.
Sweet corn?
Is it sweet corn?
I think that's sweet corn. Yeah.
Yeah. I like the butter. No salt, just butter.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Pokey on a bush, yummy on my round waffle, delicious and blue.
Blueberries?
Blueberries,
Yeah,
I would think. Yeah. Cool. Awesome. Those were really good.
Fun,
yeah. Thank you.
Very cool. Yeah. And what happens a lot of like with some of the other poetic forms where it actually turns into a research assignment where kids are having to research to learn more and able to write the poem about it. And so it's almost like you're, if you said, I want you to write a 1-page essay about, say, Brussels sprouts, what kid is going to want to do that, right? But if we can get them to think critically about writing a poem, they might be more willing to do the research, and they don't even realize that they're doing that, and learning some other literacy skills by exploring the internet or exploring a book and learning more that way too. So it's pretty cool. Another great one to, again, put kids in a box and put some pretty specific parameters around it. But this organization called Smith Magazine years ago made really popular this concept of a 6-word memoir. So the idea is that you share something about your life in exactly 6 words. And again, it doesn't have to be just 6 words in a row. You can kind of be poetic with it and arrange the text differently. So like one of the books that they ended up publishing is called I Can't Keep My Own Secrets. And this one is all teenagers, both famous teenagers and regular Joes, sharing 6-word memoirs about their lives. And so we connected this. Again, you could connect this to both fictional books and I like to do it with actual biographical figures. And so we wrote a couple examples for you. So on the top row there, those are all 6-word memoirs that I wrote for myself in my own life. And then the bottom ones were all ones that we based off of books that we use to promote ag literacy. So for John Deere, we said Bent Some Metal, Change the World. Frida Kaplan, if you're not familiar with her, there's a great book called Try It, How Frida Kaplan Changed the Way We Eat. And she was a wholesale produce buyer on the West Coast, and she basically single-handedly changed the access that we have to all sorts of fruit and vegetables that today we can find anywhere. But she was the first wholesale produce buyer to buy them and take a chance on them and allow us to get those into our diets and into the food chain. So for hers, we said bought weird fruit, people ate it. And then Norman Borlaug won a Nobel, he's a Nobel laureate for his work in breeding wheat. He saved a lot of people's lives by making more versatile and resilient wheat varieties. And so we said, my greatest friends are wheat heads. So again, a lot of different ways. Instead of saying, hey, summarize this book or tell me something about this person's life, if we can find more creative ways to do it, there's some pretty cool opportunities for kids to both express themselves, but also to show what they're learning through the text that we're using. So we're going to challenge you again. We're going to challenge you to write, what should we do? Just a 6-word memoir about their life?
About
Just
themselves.
Make it simple. Okay, yeah. So write a 6-word memoir about yourself. It could have an ag connection. It doesn't have to though. So any way you want to sum up something about your life in exactly 6 words, you can pop that in the chat there as well.
And when we say chat, we mean Q&A. We're using those
Thank
two
you.
terms
Yes.
interchangeably.
And by we, she means me probably.
Yeah, well,
yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay, another fun one, kind of in the same topic of like biographies and summarizing a person's life, is an identity web. And so they would describe the life of a person by creating a web with descriptive words about that person. So they could practice this on themselves. This example on the screen right now is a kid named Owen, who apparently thinks of himself as a couch potato, or maybe this is Owen's little sister who's writing about him and saying he's a couch potato. But you can do this really easily with a lot of historical agriculture figures, or whatever historical figures you are teaching about in your classroom. And they might not even have to be historical. They could be a person right now. If you really wanted to get your feelings hurt, you could maybe have them write one about you as the teacher.
Oh, that's
and
great.
see what they would
Oh
say.
boy.
So we created an example, one of these for Dr. Temple Grandin. If you have not heard of Temple Grandin, she is an absolutely fascinating, incredible person. She's an animal scientist, a college professor at Colorado State right now, and she is autistic. And she's had lots of books and stories and movies written and filmed about her life. She's also a public speaker now. So when she was a child, she faced all of these difficulties and hardships as a result of her autism and was labeled in a lot of really hateful ways. But she really had an affinity for cattle, and she understood the way that cattle think and interact with their environments. And through this understanding, she was able to design a more humane cattle handling facility, or whatever. It's something that you could implement into some kind of like a slaughterhouse or a cattle farm or something. And she through doing this, was actually able to kind of transform and reform the cattle industry and make it a lot more humane for the animals. And she has gone on and had this an incredibly successful career. There's TED Talks that she has filmed that you can watch in your classrooms. There's also an incredible movie, if you've not seen it, that stars Claire Danes about Temple Grandin's life. I showed that when I was teaching. I showed that pretty much every year in every class. And no matter how many times the students had seen that movie, they were still excited when it was Temple Grandin time to watch that movie again. It's really, really good. But anyway, this is an Identity Web about Temple Grandin's life. And she's got all of this stuff, all of these descriptive words and phrases kind of about her. And it's not even an exhaustive list. You could say so much more about her. But she also does public speaking engagements. So if you ever feel like having her come to your school, you could totally do that as well. The next one is text coding, and we're not actually going to do this one. We did it at the presentation in Salt Lake City, but we are kind of going to show you an example of what this might look like. But in this one, you would give students some kind of text and have them kind of write in the margins. And by write, I mean doodle a little bit in the margins. So as they're reading, you could kind of give them a list or a glossary of codes, symbols that you want them to use as they're reading. And they would, as they read, kind of interact with the text on their own terms by drawing these little symbols. And so here would be an example, I guess, of some codes that you might offer them to use as they're coding their article or ag mag or whatever it is. You could do it with a children's book or even a chapter book if you're doing those kinds of things in your classrooms, but you would want to be careful that they're not scribbling in something that you're going to then pass on to another student. So they could do check marks for I knew this, or this is, goes back to my previous knowledge, a question mark for if they have a question about something or wish they could get clarification. A star for this is really important, I think, or maybe even some Z's for this is boring, I'm falling asleep. So these would be some examples. You could create your own codes. If 8 is too many for your students to handle, you can give them 4, and they could kind of go as they read. This is an example of what this might look like printed onto an actual article. So this was the article that we used in our presentation at National. And while I'm kind of thinking about that, we do have a web page on our website that links to a lot of the books that we took inspiration from, to these articles. This one here, we link to it on that page, and then also an article that we're going to read in an activity coming up in a couple of slides. That is on that page as well, and we will drop the link for that web page in the chat for you to be able to follow. But this is an example of what text coding could look like. So they're just drawing little doodles in the margins, no artistic ability required, but just kind of helping them understand what they're reading in a better way.
All right, I'm evidently the poetry guy here today, and so
You are the English
yeah, that's right. Yeah. So the next one here is blackout poetry. This is a great one to use if you're utilizing, like we've had a few examples of our Illinois ag mags. There's national ag mags as well. Many states have different versions of these, but any kind of text that has short sections to it, blackout poetry lends itself well. I've done this with short stories also. Paragraphs from text. So there's many different ways to do it. But the idea is that students take prose, so a few paragraphs of text, and they use a Sharpie or some kind of marker, and they're going to black out everything that they don't want to use. And then all the words that are left over, they're going to create a poem from the words that are left over. And so like if I show you my example, I took this paragraph from the Pollinator Ag Mag that I wrote about a year or two ago, and then I created a poem from that paragraph talking about honeybees. So I won't read you the poem, but you can see that's what I came up with. The cool thing about an activity like this is there's lots of different ways that you can scaffold it depending on the age or the ability of your students. So for me, when I wrote my poem, I used the words in the exact order that they came in, and the only thing that I added was punctuation, and I capitalized some of the words also. That was the only thing I changed. I've also done this with students where they take little slips of paper and they write each word on a slip of paper, and then they can move them around however they want. And so they have a little bit more flexibility. You could also do it where students could add X number of extra words that weren't in the original to try to make their poem make sense. So lots of different ways to change that to make it workable with whatever text that you're using. The cool thing about this is, yeah, they're writing a poem. A lot of students don't have those skills, and so it gives them some of those poetry skills. But maybe more important than that, oftentimes what happens is as students are going through with that black marker, they're deleting the stuff that's not as important, and the things that are left are the more important words, the more important concepts. And so their poem essentially turns into a creative summary of that text. Again, if I ask a student, hey, read this and write a summary of it, they're not going to want to do that. But an activity like this, they're developing the same skills. They're just doing it in a way that's a lot more fun and a lot more allows them to be more creative with it. The other thing that's nice is when they do drill this down to fewer words, now if I want to go in further detail about honeybees, I have key words here that let's talk about a queen, or what is nectar, what is pollen. And so we can actually really start to focus on what those words are and what they mean. And then again, do some research and learn more about those concepts as well. So this works with a lot of different texts, and I've had really, really good luck with this activity with my students as well.
All right, the next strategy is read with a question in mind. And similar to, I guess, if you were going to show a video in your class and you would give them kind of some guided notes or things that they need to be kind of looking for, listening for as they're watching the video. This is kind of the same thing, same idea as that, but for reading something. An article, a book, or something like that. So what you would do is for whatever topic it is that you are about to share with your students, you would kind of brainstorm some questions or kind of gauge their knowledge kind of going into this, and then come up with, by reading the title of the article, come up with a question that they, when they read the article or the book or whatever, that they should be trying to answer. So you're giving them a direction whenever they go to read, so that they're not just reading a bunch of words and it's all going in one ear and out the other, metaphorically. They're actually looking to answer a specific question. And so what we're going to do with this one is we're going to actually have you do this. Michelle Tessa, I dropped that link in the chat, but I don't have the option to send it to everybody. It looks like it just went to hosts and panelists. So would one of you mind copying and pasting that link so that everybody can see it? Is that possible?
Yep, we'll work on it.
Okay. So when you get that link, when that comes your way and when you can see it in the chat, go ahead and follow it, because we're going to then have you follow a link to an article that we're going to kind of do for this one. So when you get to the web page, it will look like this. We'll kind of give them a second to get that.
Michelle, we might just have to drop it
There it is.
for the Q&A
Right.
questions.
Type answer to one of those 6-word memoirs, and then put the link there, and then it should
Yeah.
show up to everybody.
To everybody?
Yep.
Well, it looks like Michelle just copied and pasted it to everyone. So I think they should all be able.
I think it went in the chat though, and not the
Oh,
I'm gonna stick it
Q&A.
under a farm girl, a cow fan too. Answer that. There was one of the responses.
mhm.
Yeah, if you just click
That
type
response
answer.
from Brandy. I stuck the link under her
Yep.
response.
Okay, yeah, so it's in the Q&A under Brandy's question, a farm girl, a cow fan. It looks like they're pasting it a couple of different places.
They do see
Okay.
a hand raised from Gina. I don't know if would you like me to unmute?
Sure.
Okay, Gina, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Okay. So on the web page, if you're able to get to this link, I would like for you to click on this link right here. So for example, articles, this was the one for text coding that I showed you already. We're going to use this Organic Farm Faces Criticism article. So if you would click on that one, And the question that we are going to have you keep in mind, so you're reading with a question in mind. The question that you should be trying to answer as you read this article is, what concerns some soil scientists about the organic farming practices on Gunsmoke farms? So what's wrong? Why are soil scientists concerned about what's happening on Gunsmoke farms? So go ahead and take just a couple of minutes to read that article, enough to the point where you can get the answer to this question, and then drop the answer, your answer, into the Q&A. All right, I will go ahead and read a couple of the responses that have been put in the Q&A. Sorry to interrupt your reading. So yes, all of these answers so far that we have gotten are correct. So the damage, the concern of soil scientists is that the repeated tilling of the soil on Gunsmoke farms is doing more harm than good. It is damaging and ruining the long-term health of this fragile millions-year-old soil. And the reason for that is because in organic farming, they're trying to minimize the amount of pesticides, herbicides, all the sides that are being applied to those plants. And so in order to combat that, they are tilling more, doing some more tillage to the soil than maybe some other farms, non-organic farms might be doing. And ultimately that is destroying the soil and also encouraging erosion and those kinds of things. So yes, thank you. Thank you. These are really good responses. I'll also read a couple of the 6-word memoirs. There were some really, really good ones in here. A farm girl, a cow fan, those were a couple of the ones that were responded to. Teach English, but love ag topics. Mom of 2, teacher of many. I love that.
That's nice. Yeah.
That's really good. Really, really good. ag is passion, family is too. So yes, really, really, really good 6-word memoirs in the chat as well.
Excellent. All right, so we're gonna kind of skip a couple of them here just so we have enough time to get through everything and still have time for some questions at the end. So the next one is thinking about a text in a little bit different term. And so we're gonna show you some visual images and we want you to treat those as the text as well. So again, we're gonna make this as interactive as we can here, being virtual, but if you have just a sheet of scratch paper in front of you, and if you take that paper and if you just divide it into 4 quadrants, so just draw a big cross through it to create 4 boxes. What I'm going to do is I'm going to show you an image. It's from a picture book. I'm not going to tell you anything more about it yet, but I'm going to show you 1/4 of that image at a time. And so on your little series of boxes here, we're going to start, I believe we're going to start up in the top left corner. So you can basically, I'm going to give you 30 seconds or so. You're going to look closely at this image, look at it like you would read a text. And we want you to jot down every detail that you notice from that part of that image, right? So no detail is too small to point out. We want to see what you notice when you look at a part of an image at a time. All right, so here is the first quadrant. So write down any observations you make. It could be questions you have. It could be tiny details you notice. Whatever it is, jot down what you notice in that image. I'll give you about 30 seconds here. All right, so that's the first quadrant. Now I'm going to show you the next one. All right, so right below there, again, same idea. Anything that you notice from that image. Again, if you have questions, if there's something that's confusing, if you have some kind of connection to something else in your life, some other book you've read, all those things work too. Okay, we're going to go on to the third part. All right, and then the last quadrant here. Okay, so before I show you the full image, I'll give you a couple seconds here. Can anybody tell us in the Q&A, what are we looking at here? What are these pictures of? Again, it's all part of one singular picture, but what are we looking at here? Yeah, okay, all right, good, yeah. Cranberry harvest. So this is the actual page. This actually came from this book called Time for Cranberries by Liesl Detlefsen. She's a wonderful author. We really enjoy working with her. And she actually lives on a cranberry marsh. And so this is a book that's kind of semi-autobiographical about her cranberry bogs outside of her house. And so what I'd like you to do, if you're willing, if you in the Q&A there, is there anything that you feel like you noticed more because you looked at it in these tiny parcels? If we pieced it out here. So if you have a thought on that, of any detail that you noticed that kind of stuck out at you, that maybe you noticed more because you were looking at a part of the image, write that down and share that with us here. So obviously we do a lot of work with children's books, so it was kind of a logical one for us to do, but this works well with images, especially historical images. It works well with art. I did this in my classroom with various paintings and other artwork as well. So a lot of ways to get kids to look closely at an image. Again, to think of an image as text. I think when we think about literacy, we can think about literacy in a lot of different ways, and there's a lot of different parts of life that students need to be literate in. And so this ability to do this with visual images is definitely an important one too. All right, so does anybody have any thoughts there on what they're noticing?
A lot about the autumn trees and the fall. I personally wouldn't have really paid that much attention to that either, but that's a good context clue of what time of year
Yeah,
they're cranberry
yeah.
harvesting cranberries.
The one I noticed was the animals around the outside. So it kind of representing this idea that we have all this wildlife that's kind of attracted to this little ecosystem here on the farm too. So the ducks, you've got the fox, the raccoons, and so that kind of thing kind of pairs well with that too.
All right, there are a couple more on here that we actually don't have time to get through, but you can download these slides from that same presentation page that you found the link to the article in. But the very last thing we'll give you are there's these 3 key takeaways.
So one thing that we want to really drive home is this idea that ag literacy and reading literacy absolutely can happen simultaneously. It takes a little bit of work, but every teacher can truly think of themselves as a reading teacher and an ag teacher in whatever content area that they're teaching, but there's ways we can incorporate those concepts into those classes.
And engaging text and thought-provoking reading and discussion strategies can bring topics to life into any classroom. You can do this in any classroom, any content area, by providing them some thought-provoking things and then giving them the strategies to really think about them. That can make a big difference in what they're reading and understanding in your rooms. And kids want to be able to read and think critically in today's world. I mean, they want to be able to ascertain what's AI and what's real. What do I think about this? They just need us to help them give them the strategies and the ways to learn how to do this really well. The last thing here is just to sign up for our newsletter, just a monthly newsletter of what's new from us. If you want more of this kind of stuff, that QR code will take you there. But thank you very much for coming on this ag literacy adventure with us.
And the page that we sent you the link for before has everything that we talked about, including a couple things we didn't get to. So all those resources are listed there as well. Thank you so
Awesome.
much.
Thanks.
Thank you to Chris and Lee for an outstanding presentation. Thank you for our viewers for dropping by. We're certain you enjoy it as much as I did. Our next presentation promptly begins at the top of the hour, and you can watch this secondary track or use the other link to switch back to the elementary track. So thanks to Chris and Lee for things you can learn from an ag teacher and an English teacher. Our next session is Factory or Farm from Andrea Gardner, and we'll start that at 12 o'clock Eastern time. So hang out for a few more minutes and we'll start the next session.